Someone erased truths so terrifying entire empires buried every trace. Why do impossible relics, vanished monarchs, sealed chambers, cryptic symbols, and eyewitness accounts refuse silence? Each clue shatters certainty, inviting doubt where confidence once lived. Keep watching. The next revelation might rewrite everything you thought humanity ever truly understood yesterday. As the first light of dawn spreads across the tranquil waters of the western Pacific, dark stone walls emerge from the mist like the ruins of a forgotten civilization. Rising from a maze of narrow canals and shallow tidal flats, the ancient city of Nan Madol appears almost unreal, a place where land and sea blend into a landscape unlike anywhere else on Earth. Massive black columns of volcanic basalt are stacked with astonishing precision, forming towering walls, ceremonial platforms, and enclosed courtyards. From above, the complex resembles a network of tiny islands connected by waterways, earning it the nickname, the Venice of the Pacific. Yet beneath its quiet beauty lies one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. Located off the southeastern coast of Pohnpei in the Federated States of Micronesia, Nan Madol consists of nearly 100 artificial islets constructed atop a coral reef. Built from thousands of enormous basalt logs, many weighing several tons, the city served as the ceremonial and political center of the Saudeleur dynasty for centuries. Even today, visitors approaching by boat often describe a strange sense of isolation, as though they are entering a place where time has slowed and history has been carefully preserved beneath layers of silence. The engineering alone raises immediate questions. Unlike civilizations that had access to large populations, draft animals, or sophisticated metal tools, the builders of Nan Madol worked on a remote Pacific island with limited natural resources. The basalt used in construction originated from volcanic formations on another part of Pohnpei, several kilometers away. Somehow, these immense stone columns were transported across rugged terrain and open water before being carefully stacked into walls reaching heights of more than 7 meters. How exactly was this accomplished? Archaeologists generally believe that the stones were moved using combinations of wooden rollers, sledges, rafts, and human labor. Ocean currents and tidal movements may also have played an important role in transporting the massive columns. While this explanation aligns with known engineering techniques used by ancient societies around the world, significant uncertainties remain. The sheer number of stones, their combined weight, and the logistical coordination required continue to impress even modern engineers. Adding to the mystery is the city's unusual layout. Rather than being built on natural ground, Nan Madol rests on a carefully engineered foundation of coral rubble enclosed by massive basalt retaining walls. Each artificial islet served a distinct purpose. Some housed nobles or priests. Others functioned as ceremonial spaces, workshops, kitchens, or burial complexes. Canals flowing between the structures allowed canoes to move throughout the city, creating an intricate urban design unlike any other known settlement in Oceania. This sophisticated planning suggests a highly organized society with considerable political authority. Yet surprisingly little is known about the people who created it. The earliest construction is generally believed to have begun around the 12th century AD, although some researchers argue that portions of the site could be older. Oral traditions preserved by the people of Pohnpei speak of legendary founders known as Olosopa and Olosipa, two brothers said to have journeyed from distant lands in search of a place to build a sacred city. According to these traditions, the brothers possessed extraordinary abilities. Some stories claim they raised the gigantic basalt stones through supernatural powers or by commanding dragons to carry the rocks through the air. Others describe the stones floating into place as if guided by unseen forces. While historians view these accounts as symbolic mythology rather than literal history, the legends reveal something important. Even generations living closest to Nan Madol believed its construction was so remarkable that ordinary human effort alone seemed insufficient to explain it. That perception has fueled centuries of speculation. Some alternative researchers have suggested that the builders possessed advanced engineering knowledge now lost to history. Others propose that Nan Madol may preserve memories of an earlier maritime civilization whose influence extended across the Pacific Ocean. Comparisons have occasionally been drawn to other megalithic sites scattered across the globe, leading to theories about forgotten networks of ancient seafarers capable of remarkable feats of construction. These ideas remain highly speculative, supported more by intriguing coincidences than by archaeological evidence. Yet they continue to attract attention because Nan Madol often seems to challenge conventional expectations about what isolated island societies could achieve. The mysteries do not end with its construction. Why was such an enormous ceremonial center established in this particular location? Building atop fragile coral reefs required immense effort compared to constructing on nearby solid ground. Some scholars suggest the watery environment reflected religious beliefs, with canals symbolizing spiritual boundaries separating sacred rulers from ordinary people. Others believe the location offered strategic advantages, reinforcing the authority of the ruling elite while controlling access to important rituals. Even after centuries of research, many aspects of daily life within the city remain uncertain. Excavations have uncovered elite tombs, ritual objects, food remains, and evidence of complex social organization. Yet large portions of the site remain buried beneath vegetation, collapsed stonework, and layers of sediment deposited by time. Every excavation answers certain questions while introducing new ones about the city's development, economy, and eventual decline. By the early 17th century, Nan Madol had largely been abandoned. Historians associate its decline with political upheaval and the fall of the Saudeleur dynasty, followed by the rise of new leadership on Pohnpei. Without continuous maintenance, tropical vegetation slowly reclaimed the stone structures, while roots, vines, and saltwater gradually weakened walls that had endured for centuries. Today, the ruins stand in quiet isolation, surrounded by mangrove forests and gentle tides. Birds nest among the ancient basalt columns, while narrow canals reflect broken walls that once echoed with ceremonies, political gatherings, and daily life. Visitors often remark on the unusual stillness of the place, as though the city itself is waiting patiently for someone to uncover the rest of its story. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Nan Madol is not simply how its stones were moved or why its canals were built. It is how an island society created a monument so distinctive that, centuries later, it continues to blur the line between documented history and enduring legend. With much of the complex still only partially explored, one cannot help but wonder whether the next discovery beneath its weathered basalt walls might reshape what we think we know about one of the Pacific's most extraordinary ancient cities. Yet perhaps the greatest mysteries are not always found in vast ceremonial cities rising from the sea. Sometimes they lie hidden deep within an ordinary forest, waiting quietly beneath moss, roots, and decades of debate. From the remote islands of Micronesia, our journey now carries us thousands of kilometers south to New Zealand, where an unusual rock formation continues to divide archaeologists, geologists, and curious observers alike. Here, beneath the dense canopy of the Kaimanawa forest, stands a wall that appears almost too perfect to be natural. The forest is remarkably still. Towering native trees cast long shadows over thick carpets of ferns and moss. The air is cool and damp, carrying only the distant sounds of birds and the occasional whisper of wind through ancient branches. Hidden among this landscape, partially concealed by vegetation, is a formation of large stone blocks that immediately captures the attention of anyone who sees it. The surface looks strikingly orderly. Rectangular blocks seem to fit together with almost geometric precision. Horizontal and vertical lines intersect at nearly right angles. Some sections appear as though they have been carefully stacked by skilled builders rather than shaped by nature alone. Even visitors with no background in archaeology often pause upon seeing it, asking the same instinctive question. Is this truly a natural formation? Or could it be the remains of something built by human hands long ago? Known as the Kaimanawa Wall, this enigmatic structure sits near Lake Taupo in New Zealand's North Island. It is not especially large, nor is it decorated with carvings or inscriptions. Unlike famous archaeological monuments, it reveals no obvious clues about its origin. Instead, its mystery comes from its simplicity. The stones themselves appear almost architectural, and that appearance has fueled decades of controversy. Mainstream geological research offers a straightforward explanation. According to many geologists, the wall is composed of ignimbrite, a volcanic rock formed during ancient explosive eruptions. As immense clouds of hot volcanic ash cooled and solidified thousands of years ago, natural fractures developed within the rock mass. Over time, weathering exposed these fracture patterns, creating surfaces that resemble neatly cut blocks. This phenomenon is not unique. Throughout the world, volcanic rocks can develop remarkably regular joints and fractures. Famous examples include columnar basalt formations, such as the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, or Devil's Postpile in California, where natural geological processes produce shapes that appear surprisingly artificial. Supporters of the geological explanation argue that the Kaimanawa Wall belongs to this same category, a fascinating illusion created entirely by nature. Detailed geological surveys have identified mineral compositions and fracture patterns consistent with volcanic processes. Researchers point out that the visible blocks remain connected to a larger rock outcrop buried beneath the surrounding soil rather than existing as individually quarried stones. From this perspective, the apparent masonry is simply the exposed face of a much larger natural formation. For many scientists, the case is considered settled, yet not everyone is convinced. Some independent researchers, writers, and local observers argue that certain features seem unusually regular even by geological standards. They point to what appear to be remarkably flat faces, consistent block dimensions, and joints that resemble carefully fitted masonry. To them, the formation bears an uncanny resemblance to stone walls constructed by ancient civilizations elsewhere in the world. Could the resemblance simply be coincidence? Or might it hint at a forgotten chapter of human history? These questions have led to one of the most controversial theories associated with the site. Some have proposed that the Kaimanawa Wall may have been built by a people who inhabited New Zealand before the arrival of the Maori, whose ancestors are widely accepted by historians and archaeologists as the first settlers of the islands, arriving from East Polynesia around the 13th century AD. According to this alternative hypothesis, an earlier civilization may have left behind megalithic structures that were later abandoned and gradually reclaimed by the forest. Such claims carry implications extending far beyond archaeology. If evidence of an unknown pre-Maori civilization were ever conclusively discovered, it would fundamentally reshape current understanding of New Zealand's settlement history. Unsurprisingly, such extraordinary claims require equally extraordinary evidence. To date, that evidence has not emerged. No artifacts have been recovered from the wall that clearly demonstrate human construction. No associated settlements, tools, pottery, or human remains have been scientifically linked to the formation. Careful archaeological excavations capable of settling the question once and for all have been limited, partly because the prevailing geological interpretation has reduced the perceived need for extensive investigation. This absence of definitive evidence has created an unusual situation. Those who accept the geological explanation see no compelling reason for further excavation. Those who believe the wall deserves deeper study argue that insufficient investigation leaves important questions unanswered. As a result, the debate has continued for decades without reaching universal agreement. Adding another layer to the mystery are the stories that naturally grow around places like this. Some visitors describe an unusual atmosphere surrounding the wall. Standing before its massive stone surface beneath towering trees, they report a feeling that they are facing something far older than anyone realizes. Others speak of the forest's remarkable silence, where even ordinary sounds seem muted among the dense vegetation. While such experiences are entirely subjective, they contribute to the enduring fascination that surrounds the site. Over the years, comparisons have frequently been drawn between the Kaimanawa Wall and megalithic structures found across South America, Europe, and Asia. Photographs placed side by side often reveal striking visual similarities. Carefully fitted-looking blocks, straight joints, and apparently engineered surfaces invite obvious comparisons. Yet visual resemblance alone cannot establish historical connection. Nature has an extraordinary ability to imitate patterns that humans instinctively associate with deliberate design. Crystals form perfect symmetry. Honeycombs display remarkable geometry. Basalt columns rise in nearly flawless polygons. Throughout geology, order emerges from physical processes without any guiding hand. This makes the Kaimanawa Wall especially compelling. It exists precisely on the boundary where human perception becomes uncertain. Our minds are naturally inclined to recognize familiar patterns, particularly those associated with architecture. The same psychological tendency that allows us to recognize faces in clouds may also encourage us to see walls where geology sees fractured rock. But psychology may not explain every detail. Supporters of alternative interpretations continue to point toward the apparent consistency of the joints and the unusually flat surfaces visible in certain sections. They ask why this outcrop appears so much more architectural than many surrounding formations. Could erosion alone produce such convincing geometry? Or has some critical piece of evidence remained hidden beneath layers of volcanic soil and forest growth? Modern technologies such as ground-penetrating radar, high-resolution laser scanning, and three-dimensional geological modeling may eventually provide more complete answers. Future investigations could reveal the full extent of the buried formation, mapping its fractures in ways impossible through simple visual observation. Alternatively, deeper excavation might uncover features that challenge current interpretations. At present, however, much of the structure remains concealed beneath the earth. The forest itself seems determined to guard its secret. Roots weave through cracks in the stone. Moss softens sharp edges. Fallen leaves accumulate year after year, gradually covering surfaces that may have remained unchanged for centuries, or perhaps for thousands of years. Every season, nature quietly continues its work, obscuring whatever history may lie beneath. Whether the Kaimanawa Wall represents an extraordinary example of volcanic geology or the overlooked remnant of an ancient human construction remains a question that continues to inspire discussion far beyond New Zealand. It reminds us that not every archaeological mystery revolves around spectacular temples or lost cities. Sometimes the greatest uncertainty can emerge from a single stone face hidden in an otherwise ordinary forest. And perhaps that is what makes this place so captivating. It offers no inscriptions to translate, no legends that provide definitive answers, and no consensus that satisfies every observer. Only a silent wall, standing beneath ancient trees, inviting each visitor to ask the same simple question. Are we looking at one of nature's most convincing illusions, or at the weathered remains of a story that has yet to be uncovered? From a forest where nature and architecture seem almost impossible to distinguish, our journey now climbs high into the Andes Mountains of Peru. Here, the questions are different, yet no less compelling. Instead of wondering whether stone was shaped by nature or by human hands, we are confronted with another puzzle entirely. How did ancient builders achieve such astonishing precision using nothing more than the tools available to their age? Among the mountain terraces and towering peaks stands Ollantaytambo, a place where every stone appears to challenge conventional assumptions about ancient engineering. Morning sunlight slowly spills across the sacred valley, illuminating steep green slopes that rise dramatically toward snow-capped peaks in the distance. Thin mountain air drifts through narrow streets that have remained in use for centuries, while the sound of flowing water echoes through carefully constructed channels first laid by Inca engineers. High above the modern village, immense stone terraces climb the mountainside like giant staircases, leading the eye toward the Temple Hill, where some of the largest and most remarkable stone blocks in South America still stand. Even from a distance, they command attention. 6 enormous pink granite monoliths form part of what is commonly known as the Temple of the Sun. Each block towers several meters high and weighs an estimated 50 to 70 tons. They stand side by side with astonishing accuracy, their faces carefully shaped, their edges remarkably smooth, and their joints so precise that in some places even a thin blade struggles to fit between them. It is a level of craftsmanship that continues to inspire admiration among architects, engineers, and archaeologists alike. Ollantaytambo itself was one of the most important royal estates of the Inca Emperor Pachacuti during the 15th century AD. More than a ceremonial center, it served as a military fortress, agricultural hub, and administrative complex strategically positioned within the sacred valley. The site later became famous for one of the few major victories against the Spanish conquistadors, when Inca ruler Manco Inca successfully defended the fortress before eventually retreating deeper into the Andes. Yet long before conflict arrived from across the Atlantic, the mountain had already become a monument to extraordinary human ambition. The Temple Hill dominates the landscape. Hundreds of terraces stabilize the steep slopes below, while broad stairways ascend toward unfinished ceremonial structures at the summit. Everywhere one looks, enormous stones have been cut, transported, and assembled with extraordinary care. Some walls display the familiar Inca style of finely fitted polygonal masonry, where irregular blocks interlock so perfectly that no mortar was required. Others, including the famous temple wall, consist of gigantic monolithic slabs separated by narrow stone spacers that fit together with almost mathematical precision. The workmanship immediately raises a series of questions. How were stones of such immense size quarried? How were they transported across one of the world's most rugged mountain landscapes? And perhaps most remarkably, how were they positioned so accurately without cranes, steel machinery, or modern surveying equipment? Archaeologists have spent decades studying these questions. The granite used for the temple did not originate on the mountain where it now stands. Geological studies indicate that the stone came from a quarry known as Cachicata, located across the Urubamba River on the opposite side of the valley. Although the straight-line distance appears relatively short, the actual journey was anything but simple. The blocks first had to be extracted from solid bedrock. Then they were moved down steep quarry slopes before crossing the valley floor. Afterward, they somehow traversed the river and began the most daunting stage of all, the ascent up the mountainside to the temple platform itself. Even today, transporting objects weighing more than 50 tons across such terrain would present a formidable engineering challenge. The prevailing explanation is both impressive and entirely consistent with what is known about Inca society. Historians believe thousands of workers participated in carefully organized labor projects under the empire's mita system, a form of public service through which communities contributed labor to state construction. Using ropes woven from strong plant fibers, wooden rollers where practical, sledges, earthen ramps, and immense coordinated effort, these workers gradually moved the stones over months or even years. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that surprisingly heavy loads can indeed be transported using relatively simple technologies when sufficient manpower and careful planning are available. Yet acknowledging that something is possible does not necessarily explain every detail. Many visitors find themselves staring at the temple wall with growing curiosity. The surfaces appear remarkably flat. Corners meet with exceptional precision. Some stones contain subtle angles and carefully shaped recesses that seem almost machine-made when viewed up close. Despite centuries of earthquakes that have repeatedly shaken the Andes, many of these joints remain astonishingly tight. Earthquake resistance was one of the defining achievements of Inca engineering. Rather than relying upon rigid mortar, builders carefully shaped stones to interlock while allowing slight movement during seismic activity. Walls often leaned inward slightly, distributing stress more effectively. Doorways were trapezoidal rather than rectangular, improving structural stability. These techniques proved remarkably successful, and many Inca structures have survived earthquakes that destroyed much younger colonial buildings constructed nearby. The precision was therefore not merely aesthetic, it served an important practical purpose. Even so, certain details continue to fascinate researchers. Scattered across the quarry and along the transport route are partially shaped blocks that appear to have been abandoned before reaching the temple. Some remain where work seemingly stopped centuries ago. Others display unfinished carving marks, offering rare glimpses into the construction process itself. These abandoned stones tell a story of interrupted ambition. Many archaeologists believe construction ceased abruptly during the political turmoil surrounding the Spanish conquest. Had the empire continued uninterrupted, the temple may have become even grander than what survives today. In this view, Ollantaytambo represents not a completed masterpiece, but a monumental project frozen in time. Yet alternative interpretations have emerged over the years. Some researchers have suggested that portions of Ollantaytambo may predate the Inca Empire itself, later repaired, expanded, or incorporated into Inca architecture. They point to differences in masonry styles visible at various locations throughout the site, arguing that some massive foundations appear distinct from later construction phases. Others take these ideas much further. Among proponents of fringe theories, Ollantaytambo has become one of several megalithic sites cited as evidence for a forgotten ancient civilization possessing engineering capabilities far beyond those traditionally attributed to prehistoric societies. According to these hypotheses, the Inca may have inherited portions of much older structures whose original builders have been lost to history. Some even speculate about technologies capable of softening stone, acoustic methods of moving massive blocks, or engineering techniques that have disappeared entirely over thousands of years. These proposals remain outside mainstream archaeology. No verified evidence supports the existence of stone softening technologies or advanced lost civilizations responsible for constructing Ollantaytambo. The archaeological record overwhelmingly associates the site's major construction with the Inca Empire, whose organizational abilities, skilled labor force, and sophisticated engineering are well documented. Nevertheless, the remarkable appearance of the stones continues to inspire such speculation. Perhaps that reflects less a failure of archaeology than the extraordinary success of the builders themselves. When craftsmanship reaches an exceptional level, it naturally invites disbelief. The closer one examines the walls, the more appreciation grows for the patience required to shape each surface by hand. Every protrusion, every recess, every angle had to match neighboring stones with extraordinary accuracy. A single mistake could render months of labor useless. Yet somehow, countless blocks fit together with astonishing consistency. There are also subtle mysteries hidden in plain sight. Several blocks feature carefully carved knobs projecting from their surfaces. Similar protrusions appear throughout Inca construction and are generally believed to have assisted with transporting or lifting the stones before being left in place. Yet their exact function remains debated. Were they simply practical handles, temporary lifting points, symbols carrying ceremonial meaning, or did they serve multiple purposes depending upon the structure? Nearby, finely carved ceremonial fountains continue to channel water through precisely engineered canals after nearly 6 centuries. Their uninterrupted flow reflects another hallmark of Inca mastery: an intimate understanding of hydraulics, gravity, and landscape. Water was not merely a resource, but an essential element within sacred architecture, linking temples, terraces, and agricultural systems into a carefully integrated whole. Standing upon the terraces today, surrounded by towering peaks that seem almost timeless, it becomes easier to understand why Ollantaytambo inspires such wonder. Every stone reflects not only technical achievement, but an extraordinary relationship between people and the mountains they inhabited. Rather than forcing the landscape into submission, the builders adapted their architecture to its contours, creating a settlement that appears almost to grow naturally from the rock itself. As clouds drift across the Andean sky and long afternoon shadows stretch over the temple walls, the immense granite blocks remain silent witnesses to centuries of admiration, investigation, and speculation. Archaeology continues to uncover new details about Inca society, quarrying methods, transportation techniques, and construction practices. Each discovery enriches our understanding while revealing just how sophisticated this civilization truly was. And yet, standing before those perfectly fitted monoliths, it is difficult not to feel that some part of their story still lies beyond our reach. Whether every question can eventually be answered through careful research, or whether a few secrets remain hidden within the mountain itself, is something only future discoveries may reveal. Until then, the walls of Ollantaytambo continue to stand as both a masterpiece of ancient engineering and a quiet reminder that humanity's greatest achievements often inspire as much mystery as certainty. From the towering granite walls of the Andes, our journey now travels back far beyond the age of empires, back to a time when humanity was only beginning to build permanent settlements. If Ollantaytambo demonstrated the astonishing achievements of a sophisticated civilization, the next mystery asks an even more profound question. Why would some of the world's earliest farmers undertake an enormous construction project thousands of years before writing, metal tools, or cities as we know them even existed? Hidden beneath layers of earth in the ancient oasis of Jericho lies a stone tower that continues to challenge our understanding of the earliest chapters of human civilization. The landscape is unlike the towering mountains we have just left behind. Here, the land opens into a broad, sunlit plain where desert meets fertile springs. Palm trees sway gently in the warm air, nourished by one of the region's most reliable freshwater sources. For thousands of years, this oasis has attracted travelers, traders, and settlers seeking life in an otherwise harsh environment. Beneath the modern city, however, lies a mound built not by nature alone, but by countless generations who constructed new homes upon the remains of older ones, slowly creating an artificial hill known to archaeologists as a tell. Deep within these accumulated layers of history, excavations uncovered something astonishing. Hidden beneath thousands of years of later construction stood a massive circular stone tower unlike anything expected from such an early period. Rising approximately 8.5 meters high and measuring around 9 meters in diameter at its base, the structure dates to roughly 8000 BC, during the pre-pottery Neolithic period. Its age is almost difficult to comprehend. The tower existed thousands of years before the Egyptian pyramids. It predates Stonehenge by several millennia. It was already ancient long before bronze tools, written language, or organized kingdoms appeared across much of the ancient world. Who built such a monument? And perhaps even more puzzling, why? The tower was discovered alongside a substantial stone wall surrounding part of the early settlement. Together, they represent some of the oldest known large-scale stone constructions ever created by human communities. Inside the tower, archaeologists found a carefully built internal staircase consisting of 22 stone steps leading upward through the structure. The staircase was steep, narrow, and skillfully engineered, suggesting careful planning rather than simple improvisation. Every aspect of the tower indicates that its builders possessed considerable knowledge of construction despite living during one of humanity's earliest agricultural eras. At first glance, the explanation appears straightforward. Many archaeologists initially interpreted the tower and surrounding wall as defensive architecture. Jericho occupied an important oasis that likely attracted both people and resources. A protective wall and watchtower would seem logical responses to conflict or the need for security. Yet this interpretation raises new questions almost immediately. Evidence for organized warfare during this exceptionally early period remains limited. The surrounding wall, while impressive, may not have been ideally suited for military defense. Moreover, the tower's solid interior leaves little room for guards or defensive activity beyond the staircase itself. Could its primary purpose have been something entirely different? Another possibility focuses not on enemies, but on nature. Jericho lies near seasonal waterways capable of producing destructive floods. Some researchers suggest the surrounding wall functioned largely as flood protection, preventing rushing waters and mud from overwhelming the settlement during heavy rains. In this interpretation, the tower may have served as part of a larger engineering system associated with water management, rather than warfare. This theory explains several practical aspects of the site's location and construction. Early farming communities depended upon reliable water while simultaneously needing protection from its destructive power. Building large communal structures to manage natural hazards would have represented a remarkable achievement for societies transitioning from hunting and gathering toward permanent settlement. Yet the mystery deepened considerably during the early 21st century. Careful astronomical analysis produced an unexpected observation. Researchers noted that the tower's staircase aligns remarkably well with the setting sun during the summer solstice, particularly as viewed against the nearby Coruntal mountain. On the longest day of the year, the evening sunlight appears to descend directly along the mountain's slope before disappearing in alignment with the tower. Was this intentional, or merely an extraordinary coincidence? If deliberate, the implications become fascinating. The tower may have served not only practical purposes but ceremonial ones as well. Its builders could have been observing seasonal cycles essential for agriculture, marking the changing year through carefully planned architecture. Long before written calendars existed, monumental structures may have helped communities organize planting, harvesting, and religious ceremonies according to predictable movements of the sun. Such astronomical alignments appear repeatedly throughout later ancient civilizations. From Europe to the Americas, numerous monuments display remarkable relationships with celestial events. If Jericho's tower was intentionally aligned with the summer solstice, it would represent one of humanity's earliest known examples of monumental astronomical planning. Not everyone agrees with this interpretation. Some scholars caution that alignments can sometimes emerge by chance, particularly when numerous landscape features and viewing angles are considered. While the proposed solar connection remains intriguing, debate continues regarding whether the evidence demonstrates intentional design or simply invites modern observers to recognize meaningful patterns. Regardless of its precise purpose, one fact remains extraordinary. Constructing the tower required remarkable social organization. Thousands of limestone blocks had to be quarried, transported, and carefully assembled. Archaeologists estimate that the project demanded many thousands of hours of collective labor. Such coordination implies leadership, planning, and cooperation on a scale once thought impossible for communities living so early in human history. This realization has quietly transformed archaeological thinking. For many years, scholars assumed that large public monuments emerged only after complex states and organized governments developed. Jericho challenges that assumption. Here, long before kings or written laws, ordinary farming communities may already have possessed the ability to organize massive construction projects for shared purposes. The tower therefore represents more than an engineering mystery. It offers a glimpse into the origins of civilization itself. What motivated hundreds of people to invest enormous effort into building something that provided no immediate food or shelter? Was it practical necessity, spiritual belief, social identity, political authority, or some combination that modern researchers have yet to fully understand? Around these unanswered questions, alternative theories have naturally emerged. Some independent researchers argue that the sophistication of the tower exceeds what should have been possible for Neolithic communities. They suggest that important chapters of early human history may remain undiscovered, proposing that advanced knowledge of engineering, astronomy, or mathematics developed far earlier than conventional timelines suggest. Others go further still, imagining lost cultures whose achievements influenced later civilizations before disappearing almost entirely from the archaeological record. These ideas remain highly speculative. Current archaeological evidence strongly supports the view that the tower was constructed by the Neolithic inhabitants of Jericho using technologies available at the time. Excavations have uncovered abundant evidence of continuous occupation, stoneworking techniques, and evolving architectural traditions consistent with gradual cultural development rather than intervention by unknown civilizations. Yet even within mainstream archaeology, profound mysteries remain. The builders left no written explanations. No inscriptions describe the tower's purpose. No surviving oral traditions preserve memories from 8,000 years before recorded history. The monument itself remains the only witness. Standing beside it today, one cannot help but imagine the countless generations who climbed its narrow staircase. Perhaps elders gathered there to observe the changing seasons. Perhaps builders stood proudly upon its summit after years of labor. Perhaps children looked out across fields where some of humanity's earliest crops ripened beneath the desert sun. Or perhaps its true purpose was something entirely different. Archaeology often reminds us that ancient people viewed the world through cultural lenses very different from our own. Structures we interpret as practical may have carried sacred meanings. Buildings we call ceremonial may also have served economic or political functions. The boundaries between religion, astronomy, governance, and everyday life were rarely as separate as modern categories suggest. Jericho itself reflects this complexity. It is among the oldest continuously occupied places on Earth, its history stretching across more than 10,000 years. Layer upon layer of construction records, changing cultures, evolving technologies, shifting beliefs, and countless human lives. The tower represents only one chapter within that immense story, yet it remains among its most enigmatic. As evening settles over the ancient tell, long shadows once again stretch across weathered stone. The same sun that illuminated the tower's builders still disappears behind the surrounding hills, just as it did thousands of years ago. Wind moves gently across the oasis, carrying no answers from the distant past. The staircase remains silent. The walls reveal no inscriptions. And the people who conceived this remarkable monument vanished long before history began to record their names. Perhaps future excavations will uncover new evidence that finally explains why one of humanity's earliest communities invested such extraordinary effort into building this solitary stone tower. Or perhaps the monument will continue to resist simple explanation, reminding us that even at the dawn of civilization, human imagination, belief, and ambition were already capable of creating mysteries that endure across 10,000 years. Until then, the Jericho Tower stands quietly at the threshold of history, inviting us to wonder whether its greatest secret has yet to emerge from the earth beneath it. From one of humanity's earliest stone towers, built at the dawn of settled life, our exploration now moves across the globe to another monument that appears to bridge earth and sky. If the tower at Jericho invites us to wonder why ancient people built so high so early, the next site asks an equally fascinating question. How closely did ancient civilizations watch the heavens? Hidden within the arid coastal desert of Peru, a line of lonely stone towers stretches across a rugged ridge, quietly marking the passage of time with every sunrise and sunset. Known as the Chankilo megalithic complex, it is one of archaeology's most remarkable and mysterious windows into humanity's relationship with the cosmos. The desert is vast and almost silent. Golden hills ripple toward the horizon beneath an endless blue sky. Rain is rare here, and the landscape bears the unmistakable marks of time rather than vegetation. Jagged rock formations rise from the sand, casting long shadows that slowly shift with the movement of the sun. Amid this seemingly empty wilderness stands a fortified hill crowned by ancient ruins. Nearby, extending along the crest of a neighboring ridge, 13 evenly spaced stone towers rise against the skyline. At first glance, they appear surprisingly modest. Each tower differs slightly in height and width, yet together they create an unmistakable rhythm across the ridge. From a distance, they resemble the broken teeth of a giant stone comb reaching toward the heavens. There are no elaborate carvings, no towering statues, and no monumental temples dominating the landscape. Their power lies not in their size, but in their arrangement. Why would ancient builders construct exactly 13 towers in such a carefully ordered line? The answer may be written not in the stones themselves, but in the sky above them. The Chankilo complex dates to approximately the 4th century BC, making it more than 2,000 years old. It predates the rise of the Inca Empire by many centuries and belonged to a civilization whose identity remains only partially understood. Located in the Casma Valley of northern Peru, the site includes not only the famous towers, but also ceremonial structures, plazas, corridors, and a heavily fortified hilltop complex, often referred to as the fortress. For many years, archaeologists struggled to understand the relationship between these different structures. The fortress seemed unusually elaborate for purely defensive purposes. Thick walls enclosed narrow passageways and elevated platforms, but the layout appeared impractical as a military stronghold. Meanwhile, the 13 towers stood separately on an adjacent ridge, their purpose equally uncertain. Only after decades of careful research did a remarkable possibility emerge. Researchers observed that when viewed from specially positioned observation points on either side of the ridge, the rising and setting sun appeared to move systematically along the line of towers throughout the year. During the June solstice, the sun rose near one end of the sequence. As the seasons changed, its position gradually shifted until, at the December solstice, it rose near the opposite end. Between these extremes, each sunrise occupied a slightly different position among the towers. It was as though the entire ridge functioned as an enormous calendar. Unlike many ancient monuments that align with only one or two celestial events, Chankilo appears capable of tracking the sun's movement across the entire solar year with remarkable precision. Standing at one observation platform, an observer could determine the approximate date simply by noting where the sun appeared among the towers at sunrise. Viewed from the opposite platform, the same principle applied to sunset. This discovery transformed understanding of the site. Many archaeologists now regard Chankilo as the oldest known solar observatory in the Americas, specifically designed for comprehensive horizon observations. Rather than focusing upon a single astronomical event, its builders created an architectural system capable of monitoring the sun's annual journey with extraordinary consistency. The implications are profound. Long before telescopes or written scientific instruments, ancient observers carefully studied the heavens with enough precision to integrate astronomical knowledge directly into monumental architecture. Such observations would have been invaluable for predicting seasonal changes, organizing agricultural activities, and coordinating ceremonial events tied to the yearly cycle. Yet, as impressive as this explanation is, it raises new mysteries almost immediately. Who possessed the knowledge necessary to design such a complex system? How many generations of careful observation were required before builders recognized the precise positions of the solstices and the sun's changing path throughout the year. The movement of the sun appears predictable only over long periods of patient observation. Constructing Chankillo would have required not merely architectural skill, but an accumulated understanding of astronomy passed down through generations. The 13 towers themselves remain intriguing. Why 13? Some researchers suggest the number simply provided sufficient markers to divide the sun's annual movement with useful accuracy. Others wonder whether the number also carried symbolic or ceremonial significance now lost to history. Without written records, certainty remains elusive. The builders left behind no inscriptions explaining their intentions. No surviving texts describe the rituals once performed here. No ancient observer recorded what it felt like to stand upon the platform and watch the sunrise slowly migrate from tower to tower over the course of an entire year. Instead, the stones continue to speak only through their alignment. Excavations throughout the complex have uncovered evidence suggesting that Chankillo served multiple purposes rather than functioning solely as an astronomical observatory. Ceremonial spaces, restricted entrances, and carefully controlled pathways indicate that access to certain areas may have been limited. Some scholars propose that religious leaders or political elites conducted rituals linked to celestial events observed from the towers. In many ancient cultures, astronomy and spirituality were deeply intertwined. The sun represented far more than a source of light. Its predictable cycles governed planting, harvests, festivals, leadership ceremonies, and beliefs about cosmic order. By accurately predicting the changing seasons, those responsible for observing the heavens may also have reinforced their social authority. Knowledge itself became a form of power. If certain individuals alone understood the rhythms of the sky, they could announce the arrival of important seasonal events with remarkable accuracy, strengthening both religious and political influence. The fortified structures nearby add another layer of complexity. Although commonly called the fortress, many archaeologists believe its defensive appearance may have served symbolic or ceremonial purposes rather than reflecting constant warfare. Elevated walls, narrow corridors, and carefully designed entrances could have controlled ritual processions just as effectively as military access. Still, evidence of conflict has also been discovered in the surrounding region. Some researchers argue that Chankillo may indeed have occupied a politically unstable landscape where ceremonial authority and military preparedness existed side by side. Ancient societies often combined practical defense with sacred architecture, making clear distinctions difficult. As with so many archaeological mysteries, one explanation does not necessarily exclude another. Over the years, alternative theories have naturally developed around the site. Some independent writers have suggested that Chankillo reflects astronomical knowledge far more advanced than traditionally acknowledged. They point to the remarkable precision of the solar alignments as evidence that ancient civilizations possessed sophisticated observational techniques, rivaling those of much later cultures. Others have proposed that the site formed part of a much larger network of ancient observatories scattered across South America, connected through shared astronomical traditions now largely forgotten. These possibilities remain subjects of ongoing investigation rather than established fact. While similarities certainly exist among various ancient ceremonial centers, direct evidence linking Chankillo to a continent-wide astronomical network remains limited. Archaeologists continue to emphasize that remarkable scientific achievement does not require mysterious origins. Careful observation accumulated over centuries can produce extraordinary results without technologies beyond those known to ancient peoples. Perhaps this is one of Chankillo's greatest lessons. Modern observers often underestimate the patience of ancient civilizations. Without clocks, computers, or telescopes, generations of dedicated sky watchers could still recognize subtle celestial patterns through disciplined observation alone. Night after night, season after season, century after century, Knowledge slowly accumulated until it could be transformed into stone. Even today, standing at one of the observation points during sunrise produces a striking experience. As sunlight gradually appears along the horizon, the towers frame its movement exactly as they did more than 2,000 years ago. The surrounding desert remains largely unchanged. The same hills define the horizon. The same solar path unfolds across the sky. For a brief moment, the distance between present and past seems remarkably small. One can almost imagine ancient observers standing in the same place, silently recording another sunrise, adding one more season to a tradition stretching back across countless generations. Yet much about the people themselves remains uncertain. Their language has vanished. Their names are unknown. The beliefs that inspired these monuments survive only through fragments of architecture and scattered archaeological remains. We understand what the towers appear to do, but not necessarily everything they meant. Perhaps they were calendars. Perhaps they were ceremonial gateways through which the sun symbolically traveled. Perhaps they represented sacred divisions of time understood only by those initiated into ancient traditions. Or perhaps future discoveries will reveal entirely new dimensions of their purpose that no one has yet imagined. As evening approaches and the desert cools beneath an immense canopy of stars, the 13 towers cast long shadows across the ridge, just as they have for more than 2 millennia. They continue to measure the passage of the sun with quiet precision, indifferent to changing civilizations and shifting interpretations. Whether viewed as one of the world's earliest solar observatories, a sacred ceremonial landscape, or a masterpiece of prehistoric astronomy whose full significance remains beyond our grasp, Chanquillo reminds us that some of humanity's greatest achievements were not built simply to reshape the earth, but to understand the heavens. And somewhere between those silent towers and the moving sun, there may still be secrets waiting for the next careful observer to uncover. From the sun-tracking towers of Peru, where ancient builders transformed the horizon into a living calendar, our journey now turns toward another landscape where stone itself became a language of power and endurance. This time, the mystery lies not in the movements of the heavens, but in walls that have silently encircled a valley for more than 2,000 years. Hidden among the rugged hills of eastern India, enormous stones stretch across the landscape in a seemingly endless line, inviting a question that has echoed through generations of historians and archaeologists alike. Who first imagined building fortifications on such a monumental scale, and how much of their story has been lost? At dawn, the hills surrounding Rajgir awaken beneath a thin veil of mist. 5 rocky ridges rise like natural guardians around a fertile valley, creating an almost perfect natural fortress. The first rays of sunlight illuminate scattered boulders, dense vegetation, and winding paths that disappear into the surrounding hills. At first, the landscape appears entirely natural, but as the light grows stronger, another feature gradually emerges: massive stone walls. They climb the hillsides, disappear behind rocky outcrops, and reappear farther along the ridges, tracing the contours of the valley with remarkable persistence. Built from enormous undressed stones carefully stacked without mortar, these ancient fortifications extend for nearly 40 kilometers, making them among the longest surviving examples of prehistoric stone defensive architecture in South Asia. Even after centuries of weathering, they remain astonishing. Some sections stand several meters high, while others have collapsed into sprawling heaps of stone that blend almost seamlessly with the hills themselves. Trees now grow between the rocks, their roots slowly weaving through gaps that have remained undisturbed for countless generations. Yet despite the gradual work of nature, the overall impression is unmistakable. Someone built this. Someone invested extraordinary effort into transporting, positioning, and arranging these immense stones across an entire valley. Why? Rajgir, historically known as Rajagriha, occupies a unique place in the ancient history of India. It served as one of the earliest capitals of the Kingdom of Magadha, a powerful state that would eventually give rise to some of the most influential empires in the subcontinent. The city is also deeply connected with both Buddhism and Jainism. According to historical traditions, figures such as the Buddha and Mahavira spent significant time here, teaching among the surrounding hills and forests. By the time these great spiritual teachers walked through the valley during the 6th and 5th centuries BC, the walls may already have been standing. That possibility alone makes them extraordinary. Archaeologists generally date the Cyclopean walls to approximately the 6th century BC or possibly even earlier, although precise dating remains challenging because the stones themselves cannot easily be assigned an exact construction age. Their enormous scale and dry stone construction have led researchers to classify them as Cyclopean masonry, a term used to describe walls built from massive irregular stones fitted together without mortar. The name carries echoes of ancient mythology. When early Greek travelers encountered similarly massive stone walls elsewhere, they believed only the mythical Cyclopes could have lifted such enormous blocks. Today, the term simply describes the construction style, but it still conveys the same sense of awe inspired by these monumental structures. Unlike finely carved masonry seen at sites such as Ollantaytambo, the Rajgir walls embrace a different philosophy. The stones remain largely unshaped. Rather than carefully cutting each block into geometric perfection, the builders selected naturally occurring boulders and fitted them together through careful placement. The result is a structure that appears almost to grow directly from the surrounding hills, blurring the boundary between natural landscape and human engineering. This approach may have offered practical advantages. Using locally available stone reduced the need for extensive shaping while allowing builders to take advantage of the valley's abundant rocky terrain. The surrounding hills themselves provided natural defensive barriers, with the walls reinforcing vulnerable passages and enclosing the settlement within a formidable perimeter. From a military perspective, the strategy makes sense. Anyone attempting to enter the valley would have faced steep slopes, narrow passes, and imposing stone barriers long before reaching the heart of the city. Combined with elevated watch points on the surrounding hills, the fortifications would have offered defenders significant advantages. Yet even this practical explanation leaves unanswered questions. Why build walls extending such extraordinary distances? Was every section intended for defense? Or did portions also serve symbolic, political, or ceremonial functions? The sheer scale suggests an undertaking requiring enormous organization. Thousands of massive stones had to be collected, transported, and carefully positioned across rugged terrain. Coordinating such labor would have demanded leadership, planning, and access to considerable resources. The walls therefore reveal not merely engineering skill, but the existence of a society capable of mobilizing large numbers of people toward a common objective. Exactly how that organization functioned remains uncertain. Unlike later civilizations that left detailed written records describing construction projects, the earliest builders of Rajgir remain largely silent. Archaeologists must reconstruct their world through excavation, pottery fragments, settlement patterns, and the walls themselves. The stones speak, but only indirectly. Historical texts add another intriguing dimension. Ancient Indian literature frequently describes Rajagriha as an important political and spiritual center. Epic traditions, including the Mahabharata, associate the city with legendary kings whose stories blend history and mythology. One of the most famous is Jarasandha, a powerful ruler whose capital is traditionally identified with Rajagriha. Whether these narratives preserve genuine historical memories or symbolic legends remains a matter of scholarly discussion. As with many ancient cities, mythology and archaeology often intersect in fascinating ways. The walls themselves have naturally become part of these traditions. Some local stories suggest they were built by rulers possessing extraordinary strength or divine assistance. Others portray them as remnants of civilizations whose true antiquity has yet to be fully recognized. Such stories have encouraged alternative theories over the years. Some independent researchers argue that the walls may be significantly older than mainstream archaeological estimates suggest. According to these proposals, portions of the fortifications could date back to forgotten prehistoric cultures that occupied the valley long before the rise of Magadha. Others point to similarities between Cyclopean walls found in India and comparable structures in Greece, Italy, Peru, and other regions, wondering whether ancient civilizations separated by vast distances somehow developed remarkably similar construction techniques. These comparisons are certainly intriguing. Massive dry stone walls appear in many parts of the world, often provoking similar questions about engineering, labor organization, and cultural development. However, mainstream archaeology generally interprets these similarities as examples of independent innovation rather than evidence of direct contact between distant civilizations. Large, irregular stones naturally provide durable defensive construction wherever suitable rock is available, making comparable architectural solutions entirely plausible. Even so, the visual resemblance remains striking. Standing before the Rajgir walls, one cannot help recalling other megalithic landscapes encountered across our journey. Like Nan Madol, they inspire wonder through sheer effort. Like Ollantaytambo, they demonstrate remarkable understanding of stone. Like the Kaimanawa Wall, they remind us how easily ancient masonry can blend into the natural world until its true character is almost overlooked. There are also mysteries hidden within the valley itself. Archaeological investigations continue to uncover evidence of ancient settlements, roads, reservoirs, monasteries, and defensive features associated with Rajgir's long history. Each excavation reveals another layer of occupation, suggesting that the city evolved continuously over many centuries. Did every generation contribute to the walls? Or were they largely the product of one ambitious construction campaign? The answer remains uncertain. Some sections appear more carefully preserved than others, leading researchers to consider whether repairs, expansions, or modifications occurred over time. Distinguishing original construction from later alterations is often difficult after thousands of years of exposure to weather, earthquakes, and human activity. Modern technologies may eventually provide new insights. Detailed laser scanning, geological sourcing of individual stones, and advanced archaeological surveys could reveal subtle construction sequences invisible to earlier generations of researchers. Beneath collapsed sections may lie clues capable of refining the chronology of one of India's oldest monumental fortifications. Until then, the walls continue their silent watch. Monkeys climb across stones once placed by ancient builders. Birds nest within crevices untouched for centuries. Pilgrims, hikers, and historians follow paths that may have been walked by kings, monks, merchants, and soldiers long before written history became widespread across the region. As evening descends upon the valley, the surrounding hills gradually darken until the Cyclopean walls become little more than faint silhouettes against the fading light. Their immense stones remain exactly where unknown hands positioned them so many centuries ago, resisting both time and certainty. They remind us that history is often preserved not only in written records, but in landscapes shaped by human determination on a monumental scale. Whether the Rajgir Cyclopean walls were built solely as defensive fortifications, expanded over generations into symbols of political authority, or still conceal chapters of history waiting beneath the soil, they continue to invite careful observation rather than easy answers. And perhaps somewhere beneath those weathered stones, beneath roots, fallen rock, and centuries of forgotten footsteps, lies the missing piece that will finally reveal who first envisioned enclosing an entire valley within walls built to endure far longer than the people who raised them. From the stone fortifications of Rajgir, where ancient walls still embrace an entire valley, Our journey now follows a different path, one carved not across mountains, but along rivers that once carried merchants, ideas, and civilizations. Some archaeological mysteries are hidden beneath forests or deserts. Others have spent centuries buried beneath layers of mud, quietly waiting beside forgotten waterways. In the tropical landscapes of present-day Malaysia, one remarkable discovery has begun reshaping what we know about the earliest maritime civilizations of Southeast Asia. Yet the deeper archaeologists dig into Sungai Batu, the more intriguing its story becomes. The morning air is warm and heavy with moisture. Mist hangs low above winding rivers that weave through lush green forests before eventually reaching the sea. Mangrove trees line the muddy banks, their roots twisting into dark water where fish, birds, and insects thrive in remarkable abundance. Today, the landscape appears peaceful, almost untouched. But beneath the soil lies evidence that this quiet environment once echoed with the sounds of furnaces, workshops, cargo boats, and bustling trade. Unlike towering temples or massive stone pyramids, Sungai Batu does not overwhelm visitors through sheer monumentality. Its significance emerges slowly. Brick foundations appear beneath carefully excavated earth. Circular furnace remains rise from the ground like silent witnesses to forgotten industries. Long, rectangular structures trace the outlines of ancient jetties extending toward channels that no longer flow where they once did. Layer by layer, archaeologists have uncovered an entire landscape shaped by commerce, engineering, and human ambition. The discoveries have transformed understanding of Southeast Asia's ancient past. Located within the Bujang Valley of northwestern Malaysia, Sungai Batu represents one of the oldest known archaeological complexes in the region. Excavations suggest that activity here began as early as the first millennium BC, with some dating indicating occupation extending back to approximately the 8th or 6th century BC. These findings have challenged long-standing assumptions about when complex urban and industrial societies first emerged in this part of the world. For generations, many historians believed Southeast Asia's earliest major civilizations developed primarily under the influence of later contacts with India and China. Sungai Batu tells a more complicated story. Long before many of those cultural exchanges reached their height, communities here had already established an impressive industrial center connected to extensive maritime trade. Archaeologists have uncovered dozens of iron-smelting furnaces, administrative structures, ritual monuments, warehouses, and what are believed to be ancient port facilities carefully integrated into a network of rivers flowing toward the Strait of Malacca. The location was no accident. Few waterways in the ancient world occupied a more strategic position. The Strait of Malacca has long served as one of Earth's most important maritime corridors, linking the Indian Ocean with the South China Sea. For thousands of years, ships carrying spices, metals, ceramics, textiles, and countless other goods passed through these waters. Any settlement controlling access to such routes would have occupied an exceptionally valuable position within regional trade networks. Sungai Batu appears to have understood this opportunity remarkably early. Perhaps its greatest archaeological surprise lies not in its port structures themselves, but in its industrial sophistication. Excavations have revealed extensive evidence of iron production on a scale previously unexpected for this period. Large numbers of furnaces, slag deposits, tuyères used for directing airflow, and iron ore processing areas demonstrate an advanced understanding of metallurgy. Rather than functioning as a simple trading village, Sungai Batu appears to have been a major manufacturing center capable of producing significant quantities of iron for export. This immediately raises fascinating questions. Who were the people operating these furnaces? Where did they learn such advanced metallurgical techniques? And how extensive were their trading connections across the ancient world? Archaeologists believe local communities developed considerable expertise in extracting and processing iron from nearby resources. The surrounding region contained abundant raw materials, while navigable rivers provided efficient transportation from inland production sites to coastal trading routes. It was an ideal combination of geography and human ingenuity. The port structures themselves add another layer of intrigue. Excavated remains suggest carefully planned jetties constructed from brick and other local materials extending into waterways that once accommodated trading vessels. Geological studies indicate that ancient river channels have shifted significantly over the centuries, leaving many former harbor facilities stranded far from today's watercourses. To modern visitors, some of these structures appear puzzling. Why would ancient builders construct what seem to be docks so far from present-day rivers? The answer lies in the constantly changing nature of tropical landscapes. Over hundreds and thousands of years, rivers naturally alter their courses. Sediment gradually fills old channels while new ones emerge elsewhere. What now appears isolated inland may once have stood directly beside navigable waterways busy with commercial traffic. Understanding these environmental changes has been essential to interpreting Sungai Batu correctly. Yet despite these advances, many questions remain unresolved. One particularly intriguing feature consists of circular brick monuments whose exact purpose continues to be debated. Some researchers interpret them as ritual structures associated with religious practices. Others suggest they may have served symbolic civic functions connected with the community's industrial activities. Without inscriptions or detailed written records, certainty remains elusive. Unlike civilizations that left abundant texts describing their beliefs and institutions, Sungai Batu communicates almost entirely through its archaeological remains. Every brick foundation, furnace, and harbor installation provides another clue, yet many aspects of daily life remain hidden. Who governed this settlement? How was labor organized? Did merchants from distant lands visit regularly, or did local sailors carry iron products across regional trade routes themselves? Artifacts recovered during excavations indicate participation in wider commercial networks, but reconstructing those relationships in detail remains an ongoing challenge. As often happens with remarkable discoveries, Sungai Batu has also inspired more speculative interpretations. Some independent researchers have suggested that the site's antiquity and sophistication point toward a much earlier and more influential Southeast Asian civilization than previously recognized. They argue that established historical narratives have underestimated the technological capabilities and economic importance of ancient societies in this region. To a certain extent, ongoing archaeological discoveries support at least part of that broader observation. Each excavation has demonstrated that Southeast Asia's ancient history is more complex than earlier scholarship once assumed. Civilizations throughout the region were active participants in technological innovation and long-distance trade, rather than merely passive recipients of outside influence. Other theories extend much further. A few writers have proposed that Sungai Batu formed part of an enormous maritime civilization connecting distant cultures across the Indian Ocean, long before traditionally accepted chronologies suggest. According to these ideas, sophisticated navigators may have exchanged technologies, religious ideas, and commercial goods across thousands of kilometers with surprising regularity. While ancient maritime trade certainly existed on an impressive scale, direct archaeological evidence supporting such expansive interpretations remains limited. Researchers continue to investigate trade connections carefully, relying upon artifacts, radiocarbon dating, material analysis, and geological evidence rather than speculation alone. Even within mainstream archaeology, however, the site's importance continues to grow. Each excavation season reveals additional structures extending beyond previously known boundaries. New industrial installations, ritual areas, roads, and harbor features suggest that Sungai Batu was not an isolated settlement, but part of a much larger cultural landscape, still only partially explored. Much of the ancient complex remains buried beneath modern vegetation and layers of alluvial sediment. What has already been uncovered may represent only a fraction of its original extent. Modern technologies are opening new possibilities for investigation. Ground-penetrating radar, aerial mapping, geophysical surveys, and high-resolution dating techniques allow archaeologists to identify hidden structures without disturbing large areas of the site. These methods have already revealed patterns invisible from ground level, hinting at additional buildings still waiting beneath the earth. The more researchers discover, the more impressive Sungai Batu appears. Its builders successfully integrated industry, transportation, ritual architecture, and environmental management into a coordinated settlement centuries before many comparable urban developments elsewhere in the region. Their understanding of rivers, trade logistics, metallurgy, and construction reflects a society far more sophisticated than earlier historical models anticipated. And yet the people themselves remain strangely anonymous. Their language has not survived. Their rulers remain unnamed. The merchants who loaded iron cargo onto waiting boats disappeared into history without leaving written accounts of their journeys. The craftsmen who tended blazing furnaces left behind slag and brick foundations, but almost no direct record of their identities. As afternoon sunlight filters through the tropical canopy and reflects upon the remaining waterways, it becomes easy to imagine ancient vessels arriving with the changing tides. Smoke from iron furnaces may once have drifted above the forest, visible from ships approaching the harbor. Workers moved between workshops and docks, while traders negotiated exchanges involving goods that would eventually travel across vast stretches of ocean. Today, only silence remains. The rivers continue to flow, though often along different paths than those known to the settlement's founders. Trees shade foundations once exposed to busy marketplaces. Birds nest where furnaces once glowed with intense heat. Nature has patiently reclaimed a landscape that once connected distant worlds through commerce and craftsmanship. Perhaps that is what makes Sungai Batu so captivating. Its mystery does not rest upon impossible architecture or legends of vanished empires, but upon the realization that entire chapters of human history can remain hidden beneath ordinary ground, waiting for careful excavation to bring them back into the light. Every newly uncovered structure expands the story while reminding us how much still lies concealed beneath the soil. Somewhere beyond the excavated foundations, beneath layers of mud deposited by centuries of shifting rivers, there may yet remain forgotten docks, workshops, or ceremonial spaces capable of revealing just how extensive and how influential this remarkable ancient port once truly was. From the forgotten port structures of Sungai Batu, where ancient rivers once carried iron and merchants across distant seas, our journey now turns toward the highlands of East Africa. Here, trade routes climbed mountains instead of following coastlines, linking kingdoms across deserts, valleys, and the Red Sea. Amid these rugged landscapes stands a city whose towering monuments continue to raise questions about engineering, belief, and the ambitions of one of Africa's greatest ancient civilizations. Rising from the earth like silent sentinels, the standing stones of Aksum have watched over the Ethiopian highlands for nearly 2,000 years, their purpose partly understood, yet their greatest mysteries still waiting beneath the soil. The highland air is crisp and remarkably clear. Rolling green hills stretch toward distant mountains beneath an expansive blue sky. During the rainy season, the landscape bursts with vibrant vegetation, while ancient stone ruins emerge from fields that have supported communities for countless generations. Scattered across the archaeological site stand enormous granite monuments, some still upright, others broken into massive fragments resting where they fell centuries ago. Even in ruin, they are breathtaking. The tallest surviving standing stone rises more than 20 meters into the sky. Nearby lies the shattered remains of an even larger monument that originally measured over 30 meters in height and may have weighed more than 500 tons. Carved from single blocks of granite, these extraordinary obelisks dominate the landscape with a quiet authority that seems almost timeless. Unlike simple pillars, many are intricately decorated. Their surfaces have been carefully carved to resemble the facades of multi-story buildings. False windows appear one above another. Decorative doors are sculpted near the base. Horizontal bands divide the monuments into what seem like successive floors, giving each stone the appearance of a towering palace transformed into solid rock. Why would ancient builders carve stone in this way? What purpose did these immense monuments truly serve? These are the famous stelae of Aksum, the ceremonial heart of the ancient kingdom of Aksum, one of the most influential civilizations of the ancient world. Flourishing between roughly the 1st and 8th centuries AD, Aksum controlled important trade routes connecting Africa, Arabia, the Mediterranean, and parts of Asia. Its merchants exchanged ivory, gold, frankincense, agricultural products, and other valuable goods with distant civilizations, allowing the kingdom to accumulate remarkable wealth and political influence. Yet despite its importance, Aksum often receives far less attention than many contemporary civilizations. Its monuments deserve far greater recognition. The standing stones represent one of the greatest achievements of ancient African engineering. Archaeologists generally interpret the largest stelae as elaborate funerary monuments erected above the tombs of powerful rulers or members of the elite. Beneath several monuments lie carefully constructed underground burial chambers containing multiple rooms connected by stone passageways. Grave goods discovered during excavations suggest that these tombs belonged to individuals of considerable wealth and status. In this interpretation, the towering obelisks served as monumental markers honoring the dead while expressing royal authority and permanence. The symbolism seems fitting. Their immense height would have proclaimed the power of the kingdom to everyone approaching the city. Their architectural carvings may have represented royal residences, symbolically extending the homes of rulers into the realm of eternity. Yet knowing their likely purpose only deepens another mystery. How were they built? Unlike structures assembled from many individual blocks, each monument consists of a single massive piece of granite quarried from nearby hills. The stone first had to be extracted without modern machinery. It then required shaping with extraordinary precision before being transported across difficult terrain and raised into a perfectly vertical position. The logistical challenges are staggering. Moving blocks weighing hundreds of tons demands careful planning even with modern equipment. Ancient builders possessed no steel cranes, hydraulic systems, or motorized vehicles. Instead, they relied upon human ingenuity, coordinated labor, ropes, earthen ramps, wooden supports, and engineering principles developed through experience. Archaeologists believe enormous workforces participated in these construction projects over extended periods. The prevailing theory suggests that builders gradually dragged the carved monoliths from quarries using sledges and rollers before raising them with carefully engineered earthen ramps and counterweight systems. Similar methods have been proposed for other ancient monuments around the world, and experimental archaeology has demonstrated that surprisingly large stones can indeed be moved using relatively simple technologies when enough people cooperate. Still, many details remain uncertain. No written construction manuals survive. No ancient illustrations depict the process. The builders left behind magnificent monuments but almost no direct explanation of how they achieved them. One monument in particular continues to capture the imagination. The so-called Great Stele, now lying broken across the ground, once stood as the tallest single-piece stone monument ever erected anywhere in the ancient world. Measuring approximately 33 meters high, it exceeded the height of many modern buildings. At some point in antiquity, however, it collapsed. Why? Some researchers believe structural instability caused the enormous monument to fail shortly after its erection. Others suggest earthquakes may have contributed to its destruction. Careful analysis indicates that supporting such immense weight would have pushed ancient engineering close to its practical limits. Ironically, the fallen monument may reveal just how ambitious Aksum's builders truly were. Rather than settling for what had already been proven possible, they attempted something unprecedented. Even failure became evidence of extraordinary vision. The surviving monuments demonstrate remarkable craftsmanship. Precise carving transformed rough granite into architectural illusion. False windows display elegant proportions. Decorative details remain visible despite centuries of weathering. The consistency of these designs suggests highly skilled artisans working within established artistic traditions rather than isolated experiments. Yet questions persist beyond engineering. Why decorate funerary monuments to resemble buildings? Some scholars interpret the carved facades as symbolic gateways between the worlds of the living and the dead. Others believe they represented idealized royal residences intended to house the spirits of departed rulers for eternity. Because ancient Aksumite religious beliefs evolved over time, incorporating both earlier traditions and later Christianity, reconstructing the original symbolism remains challenging. The city itself holds additional mysteries. Excavations continue to uncover palaces, elite residences, workshops, inscriptions, coins, and religious structures, revealing a sophisticated urban society connected to international trade. Aksum even developed its own written language, minted its own currency, and maintained diplomatic relations with powerful neighboring civilizations. It was, by every measure, a major ancient kingdom. Yet many aspects of its earlier history remain obscure. How did Aksum first rise to such prominence? What factors enabled its remarkable expansion? And why did its influence gradually decline after centuries of prosperity? Environmental changes, shifting trade routes, political transformations, and regional conflicts have all been proposed as contributing factors. Like many great civilizations, Aksum's decline appears to have resulted from multiple interacting causes rather than a single dramatic event. Around these unanswered questions, legend has naturally flourished. Perhaps the most famous tradition associated with Aksum concerns the Ark of the Covenant. According to long-standing Ethiopian religious tradition, the sacred Ark was brought to Aksum centuries ago and remains protected within a chapel adjacent to the Church of St. Mary of Zion. Only a single guardian is permitted to view it, and its presence has never been independently verified. This tradition occupies an important place in Ethiopian religious heritage. From an archaeological perspective, however, no verifiable evidence has established the Ark's location. Historians therefore distinguish between respected religious tradition and conclusions supported by archaeological investigation. Nevertheless, the association has contributed greatly to Aksum's enduring aura of mystery. Other speculative theories have focused upon the standing stones themselves. Some independent researchers argue that the monuments possessed astronomical significance beyond their funerary purpose. Others suggest they may have formed part of sacred alignments reflecting celestial observations or ceremonial processions whose meanings have been forgotten. While certain spatial relationships among monuments continue to be studied, no broad scholarly consensus currently supports complex astronomical interpretations comparable to sites specifically designed as observatories. Even so, careful research continues. Modern archaeological methods, including ground-penetrating radar, three-dimensional mapping, and advanced geological analysis, are revealing previously unknown features beneath the ancient city. Hidden tombs, buried walls, and unexplored foundations suggest that much of Aksum still lies beneath the surface, waiting patiently for future excavation. Each discovery expands the story while preserving its sense of wonder. Standing among the monuments today, one becomes aware of an extraordinary silence. Wind moves gently across the highlands. Birds circle above weathered granite. Long shadows slowly stretch across stones that have witnessed empires rise and disappear. The surviving obelisks continue pointing toward the sky, while the fallen giants rest exactly where gravity claimed them centuries ago. It is easy to imagine the immense ceremony that once accompanied their construction. Thousands of workers hauling carved granite across the landscape. Master craftsmen shaping intricate facades with patient precision. Priests, rulers, and citizens gathering as another monument slowly rose toward the heavens. For a civilization capable of organizing such astonishing achievements, the standing stones were surely more than simple memorials. They were declarations. Declarations of power, of faith, of permanence. Yet time has a way of transforming even the grandest declarations into questions. The names of many rulers have faded. The voices of the builders have disappeared. Their tools have long since turned to dust, while their monuments continue to challenge anyone who stands before them. Perhaps future excavations beneath the ancient city will reveal new inscriptions, forgotten tombs, or evidence that reshapes our understanding of these remarkable stones. Until then, the monuments of Aksum remain suspended between history and mystery, towering reminders that some of humanity's greatest achievements continue to guard secrets as enduring as the granite from which they were carved. From the towering granite monuments of Aksum, where ancient rulers sought to leave their mark upon the skyline, our journey now moves into a very different world. One where humanity's earliest expressions were painted not upon stone monuments, but directly onto the walls of nature itself. If the standing stones of Aksum speak of kingdoms, engineering, and royal ambition, the next mystery carries us far deeper into prehistory, to a time when the Amazon rainforest was only beginning to reveal traces of the people who once called it home. Hidden within sandstone cliffs overlooking one of the world's greatest rivers, the Monte Alegre rock shelters preserve images whose true meaning may have faded long before history itself began. At sunrise, golden light washes across the rugged sandstone hills rising unexpectedly above the vast Amazon basin. Below, winding rivers reflect the morning sky as dense tropical forests stretch endlessly toward the horizon. The air is warm and filled with the sounds of insects, distant birds, and rustling leaves. Towering rock formations emerge from the surrounding greenery, their weathered cliffs shaped by millions of years of wind and rain. Beneath overhanging ledges and inside naturally formed shelters, traces of another world quietly endure. At first, they seem almost invisible. Faded lines of red pigment cling to ancient stone surfaces. Geometric patterns appear beside circles, handprints, animals, and mysterious human-like figures. Some paintings remain surprisingly vivid despite thousands of years of exposure. Others survive only as faint shadows, their original forms slowly dissolving into the rock itself. Who painted them? What stories were they trying to preserve? And why did they choose these remote shelters overlooking the Amazon landscape? Located near the modern town of Monte Alegre in northern Brazil, these sandstone shelters have become one of the most important archaeological sites in South America. Excavations conducted over several decades have revealed evidence suggesting that people occupied this region far earlier than many scholars once believed possible. For much of the 20th century, a widely accepted theory proposed that the first people entered the Americas relatively late, moving southward from northern regions after crossing a land bridge connecting Asia and North America near the end of the last ice age. Sites like Monte Alegre complicated that picture. Radiocarbon dating from archaeological layers beneath several rock shelters has produced ages approaching 13,000 years before the present, placing human occupation deep within the late Ice Age. Stone tools, hearths, food remains, and other artifacts indicate that prehistoric communities lived and worked here, while much of the world was still emerging from glacial conditions. These findings contributed to a growing body of evidence, suggesting that the settlement of the Americas may have been more complex than earlier models assumed. Rather than a single migration following one route, multiple waves of movement may have occurred over extended periods, with different groups adapting to a wide variety of environments. The Amazon itself became part of that story. For many years, researchers believed the tropical rainforest was too difficult to support substantial prehistoric populations until relatively recent times. Dense vegetation, challenging preservation conditions, and limited archaeological investigation reinforced this assumption. Monte Alegre helped change that perception. The evidence demonstrated that ancient communities successfully adapted to tropical environments far earlier than previously recognized. They hunted, gathered, created tools, built fires, and left behind artwork that still survives upon the shelter walls. The paintings themselves remain among the site's greatest mysteries. Most were created using red mineral pigments, although traces of other colors occasionally appear. Their subjects vary considerably. Some depict abstract geometric designs. Others portray animals native to the region. Human figures appear in dynamic poses, sometimes isolated, sometimes arranged in groups suggesting movement or ceremony. Certain symbols resist easy interpretation. Concentric circles, radiating lines, zigzag patterns, and carefully repeated motifs appear throughout the shelters. To modern observers, they seem simultaneously familiar and enigmatic. Were they maps, religious symbols, clan identities, astronomical observations, or simply artistic expressions whose cultural meanings vanished thousands of years ago? Without written language, the paintings remain open to interpretation. Archaeologists generally approach them cautiously, comparing recurring patterns with ethnographic studies of indigenous traditions, while acknowledging that direct cultural continuity cannot simply be assumed across such immense spans of time. One particularly fascinating possibility concerns astronomy. Some researchers have suggested that certain painted motifs and the orientation of specific shelters may relate to observations of the sun. At one shelter, sunlight enters in distinctive ways during particular times of the year, leading to proposals that seasonal changes may have held ceremonial significance for the people who occupied the site. If true, the implications would be remarkable. Like the towers of Chanquillo we explored earlier, Monte Alegre might reflect an ancient effort to connect human life with celestial cycles. However, these interpretations remain subjects of active research rather than established conclusions. Natural alignments can occur by coincidence, and distinguishing intentional astronomical design from accidental orientation requires considerable evidence. Even so, the possibility adds another layer to an already fascinating landscape. The shelters themselves provided more than protection from rain. Their elevated positions offered broad views across rivers and surrounding forests. From these vantage points, ancient inhabitants could observe animal movements, seasonal flooding, changing vegetation, and perhaps even the movements of the heavens. Life here required close attention to the rhythms of nature. Every migration of fish, every flowering season, every shift in river levels carried profound importance for survival. Perhaps the paintings reflected that intimate relationship. Excavations have uncovered stone projectile points, grinding tools, charcoal from ancient hearths, food remains, and pigments associated with artistic activity. Together, these discoveries reveal communities capable of adapting successfully to one of the planet's most biologically complex environments. Yet many aspects of their lives remain hidden. What languages did they speak? How were their societies organized? Did different groups return to these shelters over thousands of years, adding new paintings generation after generation? Or were the artworks created during relatively brief periods by specific communities whose identities have long since disappeared? The archaeological evidence suggests repeated occupation rather than a single moment in time. Layers accumulated gradually. New fires were lit above older hearths. Fresh paintings appeared beside earlier images. The shelters became living archives, recording centuries of human presence through overlapping traces rather than written history. As often happens with remarkable prehistoric sites, Monte Alegre has also inspired more speculative interpretations. Some independent researchers argue that the unexpectedly early dates challenge conventional understanding so dramatically that entirely new models of human migration should be considered. They propose that coastal voyages or even transoceanic contacts may have occurred far earlier than traditionally believed. Mainstream archaeology remains cautious. While evidence increasingly supports the idea that the peopling of the Americas was more complex than once assumed, extraordinary claims involving long-distance prehistoric ocean crossings require equally extraordinary evidence. At present, Monte Alegre contributes valuable information about early occupation without demonstrating direct contact with distant civilizations. Other speculative ideas focus upon the paintings themselves. Certain abstract symbols have been compared with geometric motifs found in rock art elsewhere in the world. Some writers suggest these similarities hint at universal symbolic traditions or forgotten cultural connections spanning continents. Yet archaeology reminds us that similar geometric patterns can emerge independently in many societies. Circles, lines, spirals, and grids are among the simplest visual forms humans naturally create. Shared appearance does not necessarily imply shared origin. Still, the resemblance is intriguing enough to encourage continued investigation. Modern technologies are revealing new details invisible to earlier generations of researchers. Digital photography, multispectral imaging, and three-dimensional scanning have identified faded pigments and hidden designs no longer visible to the naked eye. Some paintings once thought completely lost are gradually reappearing through careful digital enhancement, allowing archaeologists to study compositions that time had nearly erased. Each technological advance adds another fragment to the story. Yet many shelters remain only partially explored. Dense vegetation still conceals portions of the surrounding landscape. Erosion slowly exposes new archaeological layers while simultaneously threatening fragile paintings that have survived for millennia. Conservation has become as important as discovery. Standing inside one of the shelters today, surrounded by cool sandstone walls marked with ancient pigments, it becomes difficult not to imagine the artists at work. Someone carefully mixed mineral colors. Someone selected the rock surface. Someone deliberately placed each line, each figure, each symbol upon stone that has outlived countless generations. Perhaps children watched nearby. Perhaps elders explained the meaning of familiar designs. Perhaps ceremonies unfolded beneath flickering firelight while fresh paintings slowly emerged upon the walls. Whatever their purpose, these images clearly mattered. They represented memories, beliefs, observations, identities, or experiences important enough to preserve within the landscape itself. Thousands of years later, those silent paintings continue speaking without words. They remind us that long before cities, kingdoms, or monumental architecture transformed the world, human beings were already seeking ways to record meaning, express identity, and connect with forces greater than themselves. Yet despite decades of careful excavation and scientific study, the deepest significance of Monte Alegre's rock art remains just beyond our reach. Perhaps somewhere within an undiscovered shelter, beneath another layer of Amazonian earth, or hidden inside pigments too faded for the human eye to detect, there still waits a clue capable of revealing who these early artists truly were, and what message they hoped would endure across the ages. From the painted shelters of Monte Alegre, where ancient artists left silent messages upon sandstone walls, our journey now crosses the Atlantic to a quiet Mediterranean island, where another kind of prehistoric expression rises from the earth. Here, there are no painted figures or carved inscriptions to guide us. Instead, enormous stones stand in perfect stillness, arranged with deliberate purpose yet offering almost no explanation of why they were placed there. On the island of Minorca, a series of unusual T-shaped monuments has puzzled archaeologists for generations, challenging our understanding of ritual, belief, and the imagination of an ancient island culture. As dawn breaks over the western Mediterranean, warm golden light spreads across rolling fields dotted with olive trees, wild grasses, and low stone walls built by generations of farmers. Gentle sea breezes carry the scent of salt inland, while rocky hills overlook quiet coves where waves have met the shoreline for thousands of years. Scattered across this peaceful landscape are the remains of prehistoric settlements, many now partially reclaimed by nature. At the heart of several of these settlements stands an extraordinary monument. A single massive vertical stone supports an equally enormous horizontal slab balanced across its summit, forming a shape unmistakably similar to the letter T. Towering several meters above the surrounding ground, these structures dominate enclosed ceremonial spaces with an almost theatrical presence. Their clean geometric form contrasts sharply with the irregular landscape around them, creating the impression that they belong to a world governed by symbols rather than practicality. These are the talas of Minorca. The word tala simply means table in the Catalan language, an understandable description for monuments that appear almost like gigantic stone tables left behind by forgotten giants. Yet, despite their simplicity, the talas remain among the most enigmatic prehistoric structures anywhere in Europe. Unlike Stonehenge or the Great Pyramids, the talas exist nowhere else. They are unique to Minorca. Archaeologists have identified more than 30 tala sanctuaries across the island, each located within settlements associated with the Talaiotic culture, a Bronze and Iron Age society that flourished between roughly the late 2nd millennium BC and the arrival of Roman influence during the 1st century BC. Every sanctuary shares remarkably similar characteristics. The tala itself stands within a horseshoe-shaped enclosure surrounded by carefully constructed stone walls. Benches line portions of the interior. Nearby, excavations have uncovered pottery, animal bones, charcoal, and evidence suggesting repeated ceremonial activity over many generations. Clearly, these spaces were important. But important for what? The first mystery concerns construction. The vertical monoliths often weigh several tons, while the horizontal capstones required careful positioning high above the ground without the benefit of cranes or metal lifting equipment. Ancient builders likely employed earthen ramps, ropes, timber supports, and coordinated labor to raise these impressive monuments into place. Experimental archaeology suggests such methods were entirely feasible. Even so, successfully balancing enormous stone slabs atop upright pillars required exceptional planning and precision. Once completed, the structures became striking visual focal points that could be recognized immediately by anyone entering the sanctuary. Their unusual design naturally invites comparison with other megalithic traditions found throughout Europe. Dolmens, standing stones, passage tombs, and stone circles all demonstrate humanity's long fascination with monumental architecture during prehistory. Yet the talas differ from each of these. They do not form circles. They are not burial chambers. They are not simple boundary markers. Instead, they seem to occupy a category entirely their own. Most archaeologists interpret the talas as ceremonial monuments associated with religious practice. Excavations have uncovered evidence supporting ritual activity within the surrounding sanctuaries. Animal remains, particularly those of cattle and sheep, suggest sacrificial offerings or ceremonial feasting. Imported objects indicate participation in broader Mediterranean exchange networks, while carefully arranged artifacts imply repeated visits rather than ordinary domestic occupation. Some sanctuaries have also yielded small bronze figurines depicting bulls or human forms. The symbolism may not be accidental. Throughout many ancient Mediterranean cultures, bulls represented strength, fertility, protection, or divine power. It is possible that similar beliefs influenced the rituals performed around the Talas, although direct evidence remains limited. Without written records from the Taliadic people themselves, certainty remains impossible. The monuments continue to speak through archaeology rather than language. Another intriguing possibility concerns astronomy. Several researchers have observed that the entrances to certain Tala enclosures display consistent orientations, leading to suggestions that celestial events may have influenced their design. Particular attention has focused upon the bright southern star Canopus, one of the brightest stars visible from the Mediterranean during antiquity. Some scholars propose that the sanctuaries were intentionally aligned so that Canopus appeared in meaningful positions during specific seasons, perhaps playing a role in ritual ceremonies or marking important moments within the annual calendar. The idea is certainly compelling. Ancient civilizations across the world repeatedly demonstrated close observation of the heavens. From Chanquillo's solar towers to the possible astronomical symbolism at Monte Alegre, our journey has already encountered multiple examples where architecture and celestial cycles appear closely connected. Could Menorca's Talas represent another expression of that same human fascination? Perhaps. Yet the evidence remains carefully debated. Not every sanctuary shares identical alignments, and some researchers argue that local topography or settlement planning may explain orientation just as effectively as astronomical intention. As often happens in archaeology, multiple interpretations remain plausible. The Talas hold another curious characteristic. Unlike many monumental structures intended to support roofs or other architectural elements, there is little evidence that these great stone tables functioned as practical supports. Their shape appears primarily symbolic rather than structural. Why choose such an unusual form? Some scholars have suggested the monuments represented stylized doorways connecting the human world with the divine. Others interpret them as sacred altars or symbolic pillars supporting the heavens themselves. A few compare their appearance to outstretched human figures engaged in ritual gesture. Each proposal reflects attempts to understand a culture whose voice has largely disappeared. As the centuries passed, the original meanings may themselves have evolved. Religious traditions rarely remain static. Successive generations often reinterpret older monuments, assigning new symbolism while preserving ancient forms. The Talas may therefore represent centuries of changing belief layered upon an architectural tradition whose earliest origins remain only partially understood. Alternative theories have naturally flourished around such mysterious monuments. Some independent researchers argue that the remarkable precision and consistency of the Talas indicate knowledge inherited from much older megalithic traditions extending across Europe and the Mediterranean. According to these ideas, prehistoric seafaring communities may have shared architectural concepts over surprisingly large distances. Ancient maritime contact throughout the Mediterranean is certainly well established. Communities exchanged metals, ceramics, ideas, and technologies across the sea for thousands of years. Whether these exchanges directly explain the unique development of the Talas, however, remains uncertain. Other speculative interpretations move further beyond conventional archaeology. A few writers have proposed that the monuments served as acoustic devices, amplifying sound during ceremonies through the enclosed shape of the sanctuaries. Others imagine that they functioned as markers of unseen energy lines, or possessed symbolic meanings now entirely lost. At present, no convincing archaeological evidence confirms such interpretations. Still, they illustrate the powerful impression the Talas continue to make upon modern observers. Perhaps their greatest mystery lies not in any single unanswered question, but in their uniqueness. Archaeologists often understand ancient monuments by comparing them with similar structures elsewhere. The Talas resist such comparison. There is no exact equivalent. No surviving ancient text describes them. No neighboring civilization clearly copied them. They stand almost alone within the archaeological record. Excavations continue to reveal additional details about the Taliotic settlements surrounding the sanctuaries. Stone houses, defensive towers, storage areas, and workshops demonstrate that these communities were well organized and deeply connected to the wider Mediterranean world. Trade introduced new materials and cultural influences while local traditions retained their distinctive identity. The Talas seem to embody that balance. They belong unmistakably to Minorca. Modern technology continues expanding archaeological understanding. Three-dimensional mapping, geophysical surveys, residue analysis, and microscopic studies of artifacts recovered from the sanctuaries are gradually refining interpretations of how these spaces were used. Every excavation adds another fragment to the puzzle while reminding researchers how much still remains hidden beneath the island's soil. Standing within one of the sanctuaries today produces a curious sensation. The towering T-shaped monument rises silently against the Mediterranean sky. Wind moves gently through grasses growing between ancient stones. Birds settle briefly upon the horizontal capstone before disappearing again into the open air. Time itself seems strangely compressed, as though the distance between the modern visitor and the prehistoric builders has narrowed. Someone carefully selected these stones. Someone envisioned this unusual form long before the first block was raised. Someone returned here repeatedly, generation after generation, believing this place possessed meaning profound enough to justify preserving it across centuries. Yet whatever prayers were spoken, whatever ceremonies unfolded beneath the monument, and whatever beliefs inspired its creation, have largely vanished into history. The stones remain, patient, silent, unchanged. And perhaps that enduring silence is precisely what gives the Talas their remarkable power. They offer no inscriptions, no obvious explanations, and no certainty. Only a carefully balanced monument standing exactly where unknown hands placed it more than 2,000 years ago. Whether they honored forgotten deities, measured the movements of distant stars, symbolized sacred gateways, or fulfilled a purpose still beyond modern imagination, the Talas continue to remind us that some of humanity's oldest monuments preserve not only remarkable engineering, but mysteries that may still be waiting beneath the quiet fields of Minorca.